happens if he fails?
No, I don't think it'll pay off. I really hate to say to your viewers, I honestly don't think the president has a clue as to what he's doing. This is just a reflection of his deep held philosophy that goes back long before he became a politician, that America is getting ripped off by the rest of the world. And he represents a strong view of retribution, that the world should pay for abusing the United States over most of the post World War II period. I think there's a good chance that the actions that he took yesterday on April the 2nd in the United States will backfire. The risk of a U.S. and global recession is mounting. But I think, we've always come to know that recessions are temporary. What is particularly worrisome is a replay of the collapse in global trade, like we saw in the early 1930s, that led to something far worse than a standard garden variety recession. And trade is a much more important factor in supporting the U.S. and the global economy today than it was back then. So, as we wait and see what type of retaliation we're getting from the rest of the world, that's perhaps the most worrisome feature of this policy blunder.
Yeah, I mean, Donald Trump has made no secret of that he's no fan of this rules-based global trade system. Will the latest tariffs help achieve his goal of at least dismantling it? I mean, even if the countries retaliate or try to cut deals, will either scenario prove or end positively for the rules-based system?
Well, I hesitate to render a judgment on that. I mean, he is basically saying that he wants to set the rules if America is going to participate. But I think the rest of the world is going to conclude that they're perfectly within their rights to go ahead and set their own rules. And if that means the U.S. remains on the outside looking in, so be it. But that clearly raises serious question marks about the future of globalization if the world's largest economy is not a participant in this rules-based global trading system.
Mm. Well, some researchers have pointed out that the U.S. is really not the main driver of global growth. Europe, China are bigger contributors. So is it possible that Donald Trump's new trade measures won't really hurt global trade too much? I mean, one thing I can think about is how countries have been already trying to diversify their supply chains, boost their supply chain resilience after COVID-19.
Well, I would challenge that assertion that Europe is anywhere close to being an engine of global trade. The European economy has been close to stagnant for a number of years. The export shares of some European economies are larger than the U.S., but there's no real dynamism there. China remains an export-dependent economy, but even China has seen its export share come way down. It's still high at about 20% of GDP, but well below 35% of, say, 15 years ago. And supply chain repair just doesn't happen overnight. I mean, you look at the current supply chains that are operating right now, centered in, say, China, and you look in particular at Apple. It took Apple 10 years to build a China-centric supply chain. You don't just flip a switch and redo it overnight. So I think there's going to be a lot of sand in the wheels of globalization and supply chains that's going to make reorientation toward different supply chain participants, very difficult to achieve in a short period of time.
Mm. Just following up on a point you made earlier about the possibility of a scenario where we just have the U.S. on the outside looking in. Is there then an opportunity for China amid America's Cultural Revolution?
Well, I did write about the possibility that the U.S. is going through a phase where it's tearing down its domestic institutions, challenging the Constitution, and overturning many of the values and trusts that have been embodied in America's leadership role in the world since the end of World War II. And I spoke about it a lot last week while I was in China. And, I was surprised at the openness by which my Chinese counterparts were willing to discuss and compare this with their own revolution. And what I took away from this discussion was, we're not China, the U.S., in terms of the violence that ripped the country apart in the late 1960s, but we're relative to the norms that existed in the United States for a long, long time. Our changes, in many respects, just as dramatic. And unlike China's Cultural Revolution, which had really no global impact, so to speak, it was purely internal chaos. America's Cultural Revolution has both internal and external impact. So it could be